In this video, we'll take a quick look at communications that occurs during onboarding of a ATA-19x device, 3PCC, aka MPP. This will apply for both the 191 and the 192 3PCC devices, often used with WebEx calling and or other third-party SIP services or servers. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a factory reset on my ATA. I'm using an ATA-192 MPP or 3PCC device. So what you just saw there is that from a factory reset, it went ahead and released some packets, as you noticed just there. The ATA ends with a .84, so 192.168.1.84. That's the ATA. And we're going to see some DHCP activity here shortly. I'm going to change the screen over to conversations. This conversations than IPv4 makes it much easier to analyze packet transactions during onboarding, kind of what I'm showing in this video, or if you're doing other type of troubleshooting where it involves many different TCP/UDP ports in a transaction, as the phones do when you do cloud telephony. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of observe it booting up after factory reset. This ATA is already provisioned in WebEx Control Hub, so it's been added to WebEx Control Hub proper MAC address. This ATA is already in parity with the firmware that is in WebEx Control Hub, so we won't focus on the firmware aspects when you onboard a 3PCC device, including the ATAs, DEC phones, 8800 series, 7800, 6800, 9800 series phones, etc., etc. All those phones are managed from WebEx Control Hub regarding the firmware updates, so that's something you don't need to concern yourself. But in any case, if we take a look at the communications, we can see it did a DHCP. That's where it has the broadcast, the very top one, 255.255.255, 4255s. It gets DHCP. The next thing it does, a DNS will look up, and then it'll go ahead and start the onboarding. So some of the first services or servers it will try to contact is an activation server in a cloud, then a SIP flash server in a cloud. And we'll look at some of the transactions here in a few moments, but you can actually use this video and replicate in your environment if you're having problems onboarding an ATA by doing port mirroring or doing a network tap, capturing packets from the switch port that is hosting the ATA during the onboarding, and then doing a comparative analysis, what I'm showing here. A key document to leverage during troubleshooting efforts, or if you have a very tight security policy and you need to review your security policy, aka firewall rules, and see what you need to allow, would be the WebEx calling port usage document. I'll leave a link below in the description, and that's something you definitely actively want to take a look at. That document does get updated throughout the year, so if it's something that you did onboarding or firmware migrations, let's say last year, and you have a project coming up, you're going to redo or do additional onboarding firmware migrations, maybe for some additional remote office sites, if you will, you probably want to review that document, because most likely there have been changes since then, and just to make sure everything in your network security policy matches to that. Generally, the onboarding I find for the ATAs takes about 5 to 10 minutes. This assumes the ATA doesn't have older firmware. If the ATA has older firmware, then you can roughly add another 5 minutes to the number for the firmware to also get updated. So then you might end up with a number somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes for the onboarding. The ATAs, by the way, if you're wondering, do the ATA support firmware migrations such as the 8800 series or 7800 series phones? The answer is no. The ATAs do not support firmware migration, so be aware if you're coming from CUCM and you have these enterprise versions of the ATAs for CUCM, you cannot use those with WebEx calling or other third-party call controllers. So just be aware of that. That is a little bit different. Generally, what I look for is, since the ATA does not have an LCD screen to tell you what the status or state is, there's two different vector points you can look at. One is the status in WebEx Control Hub. You will need to kind of jump between pages to kind of update the page to see if the ATA is online. The other one is looking at the actual LED lights in the ATA. Generally, like the ATA-191 device I have in my lab, what I find is once it's onboarded fully and it's stabilized, meaning there's no more firmware updates or any other configuration changes, it'll have 4 LED lights that are on solid. You may see some blinking, but generally speaking, you'll have 4 LED lights that are on, and that's a good general sign, I find, that the AT is ready to be used at that point of time. Another good test is if you're having issues, and let's say this AT is at a remote office, and there's no convenient way of doing a port mirror Wireshark capture or a quote-unquote network tap in Wireshark capture, kind of what I'm showing here. You can ask the user if they can take the ATA to their home network, factory reset it. There's a little pin on the back. You can use a paper clip, press it in. I typically hold it more than 10 seconds. I like to do like 15 seconds to make sure I'm beyond the 10-second mark to do a factory reset. And then have the user test it in their home network to see if the symptom changes, if they're having problems onboarding the ATA in their office network or their company network, if you will. And a majority of times it'll work just fine at home, but if there's security issues, let's say, in the company network as far as very tight security, or let's say the VLAN where the ATA is hosted at, it was never configured for online hosting, meaning the actual SIP server controller is in the cloud. It was always done on-premise and or in data center. So some of the things to look at, does that VLAN actually, is it NATed outbound? So devices in the VLAN have internet access. Are the policies or rules on a firewall allowing the needed traffic as listed on the WebEx calling port usage document? So those would be some of the basics to look at. So we should soon be getting to the stage where the AT is ready for doing some testing. We'll do some, so I always recommend once you have the ATA deployed, you want to do an inbound test call, outbound test call. If this is going to be used with something other than a simple analog phone, I would still recommend having an analog phone available. So the test we're going to do is going to be a traditional AT&T analog phone. And so I'm going to do a test call right here so we can take a look and see what kind of results we get. So I'm first calling the analog phone from another phone I have.
Testing, 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 1, 2, 3, testing, testing.
Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and do the reverse. I'm going to make a call from the analog outbound to the other phone on the other side, if you will.
Testing, 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 1, 2, 3, testing, 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 1, 2, 3, testing, 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 1, 2, 3, testing.
And the reason I recommend doing this type of test is sometimes with other devices that you may be leveraging with ATA, overhead paging systems, alarm system, credit card transaction machines, facsimile machines, sometimes those devices may have special requirements. So you first want to establish the ATA at a very rudimentary level works correctly. So let's take a quick look at the TCP port usage, at least what I'm seeing with my example. So this kind of gives you a very high level look at the TCP ports used. Now we're going to look at UDP. So there's a lot of DNS traffic. So there's a lot of different services that it will need to reach on internet. And then also some of the other traffic, you know, a lot of the UDP traffic will be the 2 phone call test calls we did. So I'm going to go to the very top and we'll just take a quick look at the packet transactions, the communications for the onboarding. So we'll notice after I do a factory reset, it's going to do a DHCP request here, DNS request, then it's going to start doing the onboarding transactions. A lot of the transactions with cloud telephony-based devices, in this example, 3PCC telephony device, the ATA with WebEx calling, will be encrypted traffic. So you see a lot of port 443. So when you go to analyze and or troubleshoot, you won't be able to use traditional functionality like off Wireshark regarding the telephony dissectors, since the traffic's going to be encrypted. So that's where often, if troubleshooting needs to be done beyond the onboarding, kind of what I'm showing here, you have to leverage the logging that's available on the telephony device itself, and or whatever logging is available on the WebEx calling side. Obviously, you'd want to get Cisco TAC involved for that phase of things. So in any case, as you go down here, again, a lot of port 443, TCP, TLS, encrypted traffic, so you really cannot inspect this traffic of what's going on in a payload. And then at some phase here, we're going to actually get to the actual UDP packets where we make those 2 test phone calls. Also, as a footnote, I do have some other videos I've created regarding overhead paging, some setting considerations. Overhead paging systems sometimes can be very tricky when you deploy them and you connect into an ATA. There's few settings you may need to adjust to get the needed performance. Okay, so if you notice our DHCP, then we have NTP, and then we have a bunch of DNS stuff that's going on. And then let me make adjustment here just so we can see a little bit more on the DNS side. And a lot of this information will be documented in the WebEx calling port usage document. Again, very critical document. I'll leave a link below. So as we kind of go down here, and it does all the different DNS queries. And again, this is after I did a factory reset. So we are seeing some DHCP as the ATA is coming up after a factory default reset and during the boot up phase, which is normal. If you notice SIP flash, that's one of the key sites. So SIP flash and activate. And then we have NTP Broad Cloud PBX. So that's NTP server that this is going to be using for the WebEx calling. And then it's going to be a lot of different resources, because when you look at the WebEx calling port usage document, the document is quite large. It's very extensive, quite large. So if you do have a tight security policy, and you want to definitely introduce the document to your security team if it's not you doing it, and you want to spend some time analyzing that. Again, if you're running into problems, one easy test is take the ATA to your home network, do onboarding with a Wireshark capture, and then use that information when you go back to the office, and again, try to onboard it again, or just plug it in, see if it will just work as is, to figure out exactly what might be interfering. In any case, thank you for viewing the video. Hopefully this helps you with the onboarding of the ATA to WebEx calling. Thank you.